from a perspective that values human persons. No matter who you are, no matter where you're from, what you're doing can change the world if you can learn to let go of the false gods that are crumbling all around us in this time of change. This is a time where we get to build the civilization we want, as the old ideas of globalism, top-down central planning at the national level, corporatism, Keynesianism, whatever you want to call it, corporate communism, democratic socialism, corporate fascism, it's all the same. It's called false gods. They're falling apart. They're dying. And as we stand in this moment, we have the opportunity to rise up and build a better civilization for all of us that can empower every family to new heights. So we unpack the news and we get to the bottom of it. And, you know, there's been stories. You know, I saw this story in Fox News, published 3 hours ago. Armenia clashes. This is, my goodness. The headline says, U.S. and others must intervene as the conflict escalates, as experts say, with Russia and Turkey backing different sides. Armenia, are we going to have to come in and get involved? Joining me to talk about this issue is a friend of the program. He's the editor at Mises Institute, Mises.org, Tho Bishop. How you doing, Tho?
Hello, David. It's always great to be able to join the thoughtful show in the greatest state in the union. So I'm always glad to join you.
Well, this is all very intentional. We're building the best state and the best media platform that will blanket that state as we build the kind of conversations we want. Right, Tho?
Absolutely.
Well, you know, usually I have you on to talk about things closer to home, but I thought, you know, you might be able to help us unpack this story about what's going on in Armenia. Can you set the table for folks who are not familiar with this story? Some kind of a border conflict?
Absolutely.
What's going on?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm guessing that most of your audience probably has not thought much about this, but it's really a fascinating story. And in your opening, you mentioned the dying gods or the false gods that are failing. Well, in many ways, what we're seeing, this conflict really comes down to the failure of the international community for several decades now, with the way of the failure to recognize what is called the nationality principle. So what is going on right now is you've had active military conflicts going on with a region called the Nagorno-Karabakh region. So the two sides of this is Azerbaijan, which is a majority Muslim country, and Armenia, which is actually the oldest Christian country in the world. This conflict originated from the Soviet Union. So this Nagorno-Karabakh region, there's a government that has been based there since the fall of the Soviet Union called the Republic of Artsakh. Now, the people of this region are ethnically Armenian, they're Christian, and they see themselves as members of Armenia. The flag, actually, is basically the Armenian flag with a carve-out recognizing that they are separate from the motherland. What happened, though, is that when the Soviet Union took over the Caucasus, during the Bolshevik Revolution and its expansion, they gave the authority of this Nagorno-Karabakh region not to Armenia, but to the Azerbaijanis. And the reason they did this is because you had a lot of Stalin. The Russians like to create a lot of inner conflict amongst different tribes within the Soviet Union. Right, that was one of the ways that they were able to keep their control. And so, this is a region that was given to Azerbaijan, even though it's ethnically Armenian. When you had the fall of the Soviet Union, you had a very quick war where Armenians basically came in and seized control of this historically Armenian area. But ever since then, the international community has failed to recognize this area as Armenian. In the international community, it's still recognized as a member, as a part of Azerbaijan. And so doing that, you're inevitably going to have this conflict, right, between Azerbaijan that has a interest. If you say that this part of the country is supposed to be them, it is natural for the government to want to come in and take it back. Whereas Armenians say, well, look, we've been here forever. These are our people. You're not going to remove them from their lands. And obviously you have, within history, of the Armenian genocide perpetrated by the Turks. that is a very hot topic. In much the same way, there's a lot of parallels in Armenian history and Jewish history. They've been religious minorities within the Caucasus for a long time. They have historically been members of the merchant class, the tradesman class. They have a very active political diaspora, and they have a history of great pain and struggling through the Armenian genocide. And so you have this very strong nationalistic impulse in Armenia to protect Armenians. And now that you have this wrapped into this much larger proxy war between Turkey, that is backing Azerbaijan. Russia has been the historical ally of Armenia. Their other ally has been Iran, believe it or not. So you have this really weird scenario where the oldest Christian country in the world has been defended in part by Iran. But the Western leaders have, for the longest time, failed to recognize this, again, Artsakh as an Armenian country, and that has set the stage for what we're seeing at now. And it is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, and how Trump ends up handling these two scenarios. Because now, again, having to deal with Russia on one side and Turkey on the other, those are two very powerful forces. What's scary is that this is one of those conflicts where one bomb at the wrong place ends up bringing two world powers into a conflict that nobody wants to see.
So what's the thing that folks at home need to take away the most from this development, this conflict there?
Well, one of the things is that this I think is an example of where this Trump movement, this populist movement, is very, very important. Because, again, what we're seeing, and we've seen it play throughout and for a variety of different global affairs, right? But I think it's all connected to the same issue, which is the inadequacies of the post-Cold War geopolitical area, right? So, again, there's a lot of hubris. There's a lot of arrogance by international leaders believing that they could ignore these things like ethnicity, countrymen, a religion. It was this desire to view the world through this more egalitarian lens that wanted to devalue what these connections between human beings really are worth. And so again, if you have that viewpoint and nationality does not matter, then you create this stage where you ignore the fact that you have this population sitting there with the international body refusing to recognize the only government of any sort of legitimacy that it might have. So again, I think it speaks to the failings of this international order that again, Trump, Brexit, the populist movements within the EU, some of the movements in Latin America, all of these are drumbeats in a failure of that post-Cold War era, that neoliberal globalist order. And so this is simply another sort of symptom of that era of human history failing. And it's up to us to try to create something that can be a lot more stable going forward.
A listener on YouTube says, I guess his name's Mushvig. He says, Karabakh is Azerbaijan. Stop Armenian aggression. I invite everyone to condemn the Armenian violation. He says, we Azerbaijanis fight in order to return back our territories, which was occupied by Armenia 30 years ago. We did our best to solve the issue by discussion for years. What's your response, though, Bishop?
No, this is not a clear black and white issue, and I apologize if I'm making out, because the thing is that it's true that when you had Azerbaijani control of Nagorno-Karabakh, you had a lot more Azerbaijanis then than you have now. And so you had a lot of Azerbaijanis that left this region because of fear of the Armenian government. That's really true. The thing, though, is that as long as the country as it exists, I don't think this is up for dispute. The region that exists now is majority Armenian, and it was historically so. The numbers have changed over time. So that's why what is important is to create a legal system here where you can properly rectify genuine claims of property rights violations, right? Yeah, the essence of civilization is property rights. So you want to be able to get to a point where you can properly try to make whole those innocently caught up in this interstate, in a two-country dispute. But you're not going to have that as long as you have this gigantic question mark. And the idea, again, that you're going to be able to have an international norm set. You're going to clear out Armenians from Artsakh. That is not a good outcome, I don't think, for anyone. And so it is important to recognize, I think, nationality, to be able to get to the point where you can recognize property rights, so you can get to the point to get to true justice. Because unfortunately, right now you have a political situation where two sides see it as a zero-sum game, and that is a very dangerous situation for all involved.
Tassos Platis says, buddy, Armenians have been living there from biblical times. My goodness. Yeah. Man, this is really gives you a headache when you try to be a nation builder, though. I just can't figure it out.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This goes to why it is important for powers that have some humility, right? I mean, you're dealing with centuries-old conflicts, and bureaucrats in Washington are equipped to deal with it. And so again, what we need now is a peace treaty. And things that this has been a simmering conflict again since the Soviet Union, since the fall of the Soviet Union. This is not a new conflict. This has been one of the longest active conflicts in the world, right? And so it's going to take, if this conflict simply is allowed to devolve into a proxy war between Turkey and Russia, the biggest victims of it are going to be those on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh. Right? Neither Turkey nor Russia's government cares at all about the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians when it comes down to it. They care about their own state interests.
Yeah.
And so trying to get us to a point where we can have a reasonable conversation. People have been trying for decades, but Trump has been able to do a lot on the diplomatic front that I don't think a lot of people have thought possible. And so, again, hopefully this is an area where there might be room for a nuance in negotiation rather than it escalating into the sort of conflict between powers that can lead to very, very bad consequences for all involved.
Yeah, Mushfig goes on to say, even now we didn't have intention to start fight, but imagine for a minute that your country's 20% is occupied and you try to solve it on peace table and suddenly, surprise, there's new attack by Armenia to take new territories. So we understood. So,
Yep.
This is where, it'd be great, though, if we could be more like Switzerland, right? Instead of having to be the policeman of the world.
Yes. No, absolutely. The scary thing here is, if this gets wrapped up until you end up in a situation that devolves, where you have a lot of other international actors in it, again, it's going to be bad. It's a very dangerous situation.
What are the globalists? What's the Davos crowd saying about this story right now?
It's interesting because you have so Armenia in just a couple of years ago had a major government revolution, and that really kind of shook things up a lot because the government of Armenia prior to that was a very corrupt government that was very, very close to Russia. And so there was a lot of outreach from kind of new government, which is very nationalist. It's like if you look at what they actually say in Armenia, it's very nationalist. But they were trying to do a lot more outreach to the Western world, so that the major allies would be Russia and Iran. And on the flip side, Azerbaijan has become an economic powerhouse. I think Azerbaijan's defense budget is larger than Armenia's entire national budget. So there's been a lot of energy. It's a very energy-rich area, particularly in Azerbaijan. So you have a lot of economic dynamics there that the ground has been shifting. The dynamics in between the two countries have been shifting a great deal in very recent history, which I think is probably a reason why you're seeing a lot more back and forth. Both sides have reasons to blame the other. Again, I'm willing to recognize that there's a lot of murkiness whenever you deal with anything like this. But it is a very interesting and this is a conflict that could escalate if international actors are allowed to hijack this for their own ends.
So, Tho, do you believe we should intervene, America?
I absolutely not. I don't think that this is anywhere where a boots on the ground situation helps. I think that in the best case scenario would be, if I were in Trump's situation, I think that recognizing Artsakh would go a long way as Armenian, which again, I know would inflame Azerbaijan relations. I know. But to bring this to the table so that we, a means of recognizing Artsakh in exchange for dealing with the property rights violations that are valid, I think, on the Azerbaijani side, I think would be the best scenario out there. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. again, staying neutral on this, the status quo is stacked towards the Azeri side because the status quo is recognizing this territory as a part of Azerbaijan. So again, like even doing nothing, it's very difficult to have neutrality in this issue, just from a diplomatic side, which can always makes things a little more difficult. So how this plays out is going to be very interesting, and how Trump manages with Turkey and Russia is going to be fascinating going forward.
And Joe Biden was going to manage it, but he had to call a lid today, I think at, 9 a.m.?
He's in his basement somewhere trying to cram on this stuff.
So is he ready to take on Armenia's problems in Azerbaijan? I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, you're going to that might be a good way of getting troops involved.
Hey, Kamala Harris is a Harry Truman Democrat, so she likes nukes and stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. What a wonderful anti-fascist candidate, huh? Amazing.
Yeah, it's a bold hope and change right there.
All right, Tho, appreciate you coming on the program as always. Mises.org is Tho's website. We'll continue to follow your work.
Thank you for having me, David.
Back in a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. Stay with us. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
And now, A Quality Service of Tampa Bay is reminding Americans to show support to the brave men and women who serve our U.S. military. Their tireless efforts should never go unnoticed. This salute is from veteran-owned and operated A Quality Service of Tampa Bay, backed by nearly 40 years of experience. When it comes to the very best in heating, cooling, and appliance repair, we recommend no finer name than A Quality Service of Tampa Bay. You call 813-962-0818. That's 813-962-0818. That's A Quality Service of Tampa Bay, proudly serving our troops and veterans, their people who care.
Our monetary system is failing. Negative interest rates, growing debt, highly speculative market, and the dollar is being devalued by the Fed. Investing your wealth has never been more challenging. Who wants to earn just 1% interest annually in a savings account? There is another option, monetary metals. They pay interest on gold, in gold, with no storage costs ever. Visit interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David. So, are you getting ready for Royal Rumble between Joseph R. Biden and Donald J. Trump tomorrow night? Get your seats ready. Get your popcorn ready. It is the clash of titans. Weighing in at 50 years at political power, we have Joseph R. Biden, who does 1 hour of campaigning every other day, it looks like. My goodness. Kamala Harris is busy probably locking people up as we speak. That seems to be kind of a pastime for this great social agent of change. My goodness. Amazing the kind of gimmicks these new performance artist characters come up with. And we have Donald J. Trump, the designated villain that you're supposed to boo. Everybody, come on now. The media says, boo. You're supposed to boo. Aren't you doing your job? It's your duty to submit to the press, right? If the free press presses you in the right direction, you move. You do exactly as they're told, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? That's what we're excited about, right? Ready for our little Muppet show or a little pro wrestling match, teach us what we're supposed to think next. And I understand there is some importance in these things, but I think we have to remember that this is kind of a show, a carnival. At the end of the day, nobody can plan out your life for you. You have to take charge of your life. You have to pay off your debts. You have to live within your means. You have to save. You have to be able to understand the decline of the dollar and navigate thusly. You have to be able to be careful about buying things that are way beyond your ability to pay off. That's up to you. You have to be able to be nimble and stack your talents in creative ways to create business opportunities that can let your family thrive, even in a tumultuous time. It's up to you. You have to take care of your body. Can't wait for a government to do it. They're doing everything they can to keep us stuck in failing, outdated medical paradigms that have made us sick, perpetually sick. As I say all the time, universal, single-payer medical care cannot fix what universal, single-payer medical nutrition science broke. They gave us a food pyramid. They got us all sick. They replaced grandma's butter with garbage, toxic margarine that does a number on your insulin, that does a number on your ability to have health and fitness, does a number on your body's ability to fight off inflammation. They replaced our ancestral eating habits, eating nose to tail, healthy, fatty animals. They replaced that with eating garbage, eating like animals, eating like squirrels, eating nuts. As I say, eat the rabbit, not the carrot. They want you to eat the carrot-flavored soybean cracker. And that's why we're having the problems we have in our healthcare system. So single-payer nutrition broke our bodies, and now they want to do the rest of the job with single-payer government healthcare. But have no fear. The debates are almost here. What are you going to learn? Are they going to run your life for you the way you want? Or are you going to take care of yourself? In a moment, we're going to hear from veterans with real skin in the game. Sergeant Dan McKnight will join us with Major Danny Sjursen as we unpack the legacy of General Smedley Butler. Back in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice.
Ronald Reagan will turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040 WHP.
President Trump says 150 million rapid COVID-19 tests are on their way to parts of the nation which need the most.
100 million rapid point-of-care tests will be given to states and territories to support efforts to reopen their economies and schools immediately and fast as they can.
Mr. Trump didn't take any questions at the Rose Garden announcement, though, including those on a New York Times report about his taxes. A not guilty plea from the only Louisville police officer charged in connection with the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. Last week, a grand jury indicted Brett Hankinson on 3 counts of wanton endangerment for firing into neighboring apartments. A somber update from California Governor Gavin Newsom on one of the 27 wildfires now burning in the state.
The Zog fire up in Shasta County, also familiar territory, literally, not just figuratively. 7,000 acres so far have burned.
Red flag warnings are in effect for parts of northern and southern California. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Soaring high across the Sunshine State. On FM and AM, we're coming to you live. It's a neighbor's choice. I'm your host, David Gronowski, and now we're turning to our new series we've been kicking off. We call it Veterans Radio, brought to you by BringOurTroopsHome.us. And we have the founder of BringOurTroopsHome.us with me again for our series we do each Monday at this time. You don't want to miss it. Or if you miss it, you can always catch it on our podcast because you want to share it with everybody online. We call it Veterans Radio. We have Sergeant Dan McKnight with us. How you doing?
Good, David. How are you?
I'm great to have you on the program. And I've got people on the comments raging about Azerbaijan versus Armenia right now, which who's got control over what? And I said, my goodness, this is just a reminder we don't need to get involved, right, Dan?
That's right. Non-intervention at this point without a threat to national security is definitely the key.
Well,
but David, today, though, I'm excited to talk about what we have on schedule for today. And it's not very often that we get to conduct a full frontal attack or an assault on the leader of the military-industrial complex in the United States, on the primary proponent of the United States war machine, on the heiress of the war profiteer fortunes. You know who we're talking about, David. We're talking about a full frontal assault today on the butcher of Bethesda herself, Sweet Elizabeth, Liz Cheney from the great state of Wyoming. I'm excited to talk about this today, and it's not very often we're going to do it. We know who she is. We know who Liz Cheney is. She's in our sights. We know full well that she has this bloodlust and this love of forever and endless wars, right? We know that she has a heritage of growing up as the apple of her father's eye and learning how to use the United States military and the massive military budget to stuff daddy's pockets, right? We know that she holds the collection plate at the altar of endless wars and that she accepts defense contractor donations to keep America's young men and women engaged in wars, David, forever. We know who she is. We know who you are, Elizabeth, and we're about to tell the world. David, you know how it is. Our organization, BringOurTroopsHome.us, we've identified GOP candidates who Liz has doled out countless of campaign contributions through her very own cowboy pack, people that she's bought and paid for, people that she's donated thousands and thousands of dollars to GOP congressmen to buy their support for her efforts to specifically obstruct President Trump and his efforts to finally end the war in Afghanistan. Sweet Liz, working with the House Democrats and her neighbor straight to the south, Democratic Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado, they've attached an amendment to the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, which strips all money that President Trump would use to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. And she did this with the full support of the Democratic House of Representatives. But the most disturbing part is, David, today is that there are GOP candidates and GOP congressmen that support Cheney because she's bought their support through her cowboy pack donations to their reelection campaigns. And we know that war is a racket, David. We're going to talk about that today, and we'll get into it in detail with our guest. But before we do, I need to publicly tell all of our listeners about our current Cheney project. We've decided to do our best to make Liz Cheney as toxic as possible in the House of Representatives. She currently serves as the GOP conference chairwoman, which we all know is the third highest ranking GOP member of the House. And if the Republicans win the House in November, which it's a small possibility, there's no doubt that Cheney would actively seek the Speaker of the House position. And as veterans and advocates for responsible American foreign policy, we cannot allow Liz one more ounce of influence in the lower house, the People's House. We're demanding that all GOP candidates and congressmen who accepted their financial contributions from Cheney's cowboy pack, they reject her and her attempts to buy their support. We're asking that they donate all that money back to a veterans organization of their own choosing. Just last week, we went to Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick's office in Pennsylvania, and he accepted $5,000 of money from Liz Cheney's PAC, and his staff locked us out of their office, David. We went there to present a letter just simply asking him to reject her and to support President Trump, and they locked us out. I guess we know now where Brian Fitzpatrick stands. He can be bought. He supports endless wars. He bows down at the bloody altar of endless wars. Brian Fitzpatrick, we see you, and we hear you loud and clear, and we now know that you and Liz are yoked together under the label of warmonger. Now, right in your backyard, David, in Florida, there's 4 Republicans that have accepted Liz's blood money. Representative Michael Waltz, which is Florida 6, Daytona Beach area, directly to your east. Representative Brian Mast of Florida, in Florida 18, West Palm Beach, directly to your east, immediately. Carlos Jimenez in Florida 26, which is directly to your south. And Maria Elvira Salazar in Florida 27th, which is Miami-Dade, also to your south. I encourage anybody that's listening to us right now that can hear this broadcast to call these 4 Republicans and ask them to support President Trump's effort to end the war in Afghanistan and reject Cheney's blood money. And David, you and I both know that war is a racket. There's a political elite class that wants to keep us in war forever. But our guest today is a friend of ours, a friend of the show, right? It's retired United States Army Major, former West Point history professor, author, columnist, and a patriotic dissenter, and our friend, Danny Sjursen. Danny, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. This is such an important conversation.
Yeah,
it sure is.
I always,
go ahead, David.
I always love hearing the real veterans who have been overseas prosecuting these wars to talk about the real roots of these wars for our listening audience right now. There's a lot of folks, they don't know where to stand on these issues, but Danny, you're good at getting into the history of things. That's your background, isn't it? Understanding the history of these military conflicts, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I started out as a historian, studying at West Point, and then sort of followed that track, and it definitely informs even my policy analysis today.
Well, Sergeant Dan McKnight, you talked. You said that Danny is really your go-to guy to understand the story of General Smedley Butler, and I have the copy of War is a Racket, which was written by General Smedley Butler. Tell us a little about this book for folks who've never heard of this, and why we should think about his legacy right now.
Yeah, you want to take that, or you want to? I know this is a hero of yours, so I'm going to let you jump in.
Absolutely. So, Smedley Butler is this fascinating character because he comes from Westchester, Pennsylvania. He's educated in pacifist Quaker schools, but this is no hippie dove. Okay, 33 years in uniform, rises to the rank of Major General in the Marine Corps, which at the time was the highest rank available in the Marine Corps. He wins 2 Congressional Medal of Honors, which puts him in a pretty small crew. Historically, he would have won more, but early in his career, officers couldn't win the Medal of Honor. In fact, some of his he serves in at least 10 different wars or armed interventions. He's in Cuba, China, the Philippines, Panama, Nicaragua, Mexico, Haiti, France, and back in China again. And, he had some doubts during his time in the service, despite his phenomenal leadership and courage on the ground. But after retirement, 1931, he decides to get vocal, really in a way that no general before and certainly since ever has, so that he begins going on these speaking tours. And again, he's not just saying, let's sing Kumbaya together. He's bringing together a broad segment of folks on the left and the right who are skeptical of these forever wars of their day, in many cases called the Banana Wars, wars fought for business interests, and what was not yet called, but already had started to exist, the military-industrial complex. And in 1935, the culmination of these nationwide, highly popular speaking tours is this short essay-length book, War is a Racket, where he says, I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, but during that time, I was mostly a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. And he talks about how in every one of these deployments, in many cases, he was lining the pockets of the very same folks that people like Liz Cheney and Jason Crow are working for today. So we really are coming full circle. And I think that if I was going to say the most important thing about Smedley Butler is that he wasn't a partisan. He wasn't just some lefty. He wasn't just some righty. He was an American hero who decided to put America first, which in his case, in his moment, and I think we're there again today, was a sensible foreign policy that did not involve putting America's sons and now daughters in harm's way for anything but national defense or genuine strategic interest. He wanted to end the forever wars of his day, and he made a real contribution.
Yeah, Sergeant Dan McKnight, what's your take on the war is a racket and the legacy of Smedley Butler?
Yeah, so like Danny said, when Smedley Butler wanted to end the forever wars of his day, it wasn't because he was a pacifist dove. He was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient twice. And I think that's where guys like myself, a conservative Republican, and guys like Danny Sjursen, a more progressive, left of center, kind of a free thinker, I think that's where guys like us can come together. We don't agree on much. Danny and I don't agree on the protests going on in the streets right now. We don't agree on socialized health care. We don't agree on much. But on this topic, Danny, you and I agree, and we're in lockstep that if there's a need for the military to go to war, then by golly, Congress should do their job first and put their name on the line and declare war for a national interest, a national security interest, and put their name on the line before they ask us to put our boots on the ground.
I just want to add that I couldn't agree more. There is this natural convergence of interest that's nonpartisan, that is transpartisan, and Smedley was at the root of that. I think there's two things that are important. The first one is that we haven't had a Smedley Butler since, largely because of the sort of revolving door corruption surrounding the military-industrial complex. We have hundreds more generals now than we did today, but we can't get one Smedley Butler to go on TV, or at least not really anyone of that prominence. And I agree about Congress. And could there be anything more obscene than a Congress using its power of the purse not to end a war, but to stop a president from his attempts to end a war? That's obscene. And when someone like Jason Crow is behind it, a Democrat, a combat veteran himself, I can't help but call him a veteran quisling, because he is collaborating with the Liz Cheney types. He's no better than them. He's part and parcel of the same complex of forever war that does not benefit my soldiers and yours at $30,000 or $40,000 a year, but lines somebody's pockets with millions.
Absolutely, and because we revere Smedley Butler, we hold him in such high regard. We're taking our group, bring our troops home. Myself, Danny Sjursen, are going back to Westchester, Pennsylvania. We're going back to his birthplace and to the place where he's interred, the place where he's buried, where his grave is at. We're going on the 19th of October of this year into the Pennsylvania 6th District, a swing district in a swing state with veterans on the 19th anniversary of the United States military boots on the ground in Afghanistan. October 19th, Westchester, Pennsylvania. We'll be there speaking with veterans, talking about war being a racket, and that there are people that are lining their pockets. There's a reason why every building in Washington, D.C. that's over 2 stories tall, all those big glass and steel buildings, all filled with the Raytheons and the General Dynamics of the world, it's because they're close to the seat of power. And we're going to be there talking about war being a racket, and we're going to lay a wreath at Smedley Butler's grave, and we're going to remember the man and remember the mission and remember his sacrifice and the tarnishing of his own reputation that he willingly took when he opposed the military-industrial complex back in his day. And I can't wait to be there with you, Danny. It's going to be a great event.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Sergeant Dan McKnight, you bring up a good point about Raytheon, these different companies, because if I'm not mistaken, I remember General Smedley Butler, he blew the whistle that a lot of powerful corporations had approached him to engage in a coup. Is that not right? A fascist coup with military. He didn't go along with it. It never happened. But do you guys have any comments on that? Because we've heard that talked about recently. Folks have said, "Oh, should the military be involved in this election?" So, regardless of how this shakes out, it certainly is timely to reflect on what Smedley Butler blew the whistle on in his own time, that people had approached him to say, "Hey, why don't you do a coup? We'll back you. We're big corporations."
Well, I can say that,
you got that?
They call it, the Wall Street coup and all of this. And, Smedley stood by the truth of it, that he had been approached, and there are other sources that have also kind of confirmed it. But I think that, again, getting at this connectiveness between Dan and I, right? Dan and Danny, who don't agree on just about every single issue, but we totally are lockstep on the national interest. Make no mistake, Smedley Butler was not going to go along with a coup for any corporate sort of defense interests of his day. But neither was he an FDR Democrat. Neither did he support. He kind of fell out with Franklin Roosevelt. So he kind of hewed that middle line of the national interest as he saw it. And he did, in his own way, remain sort of nonpartisan. So he was against a coup on behalf of, the defense contractors of his day. But he also was not supportive of Franklin Roosevelt's sort of hijacking, in many cases, of executive power in foreign policy to drive America towards a war. Now, did the Nazis have to be defeated? Of course. That's a debate for another time. But regardless, he did raise the alarm about the gathering of executive power in foreign policy that Dan was just talking about in terms of how Congress needs to reassert itself. So one of the great aspects of Butler surrounding this coup story is that, he didn't become a partisan for Roosevelt in response. In fact, he had fallen out with Roosevelt on a number of other issues.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, we need more folks like that today, that are independent-minded. And it's hard to cut through the noise and confusion because it seems the media wants nothing but the opposite of Smedley Butler. They want perpetual war. But in the book, War is a Racket, which I invite people to check out, it's a short little pamphlet that he wrote. He outlines line by line the cost of toothbrushes and all kinds of basic essentials, shoes. That's something we don't talk about, is it? We always talk about the weapons and the bullet manufacturers, but there's a lot of money to be made on every little supply, isn't there, for the military?
Absolutely. And, when I was at Fort Stewart, Georgia, in my active duty Army days, there was a general whose son owned the local hardware store in town in Hinesville. And we used to buy $400 toilet seats and $300 hammers from him. And that was at a time of peace. That was in the mid-'90s. And there's always money to be made in the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you real quick. I saw this story today in Yahoo. Army announces fall deployments to Afghanistan and Korea. Want to get your take on this. The Army announced that a combat brigade from the 10th Mountain Division will deploy this fall to Afghanistan for a rotation to support Operations Freedom Sentinel. The 2nd Brigade combat team based in Fort Drum, New York, will replace the 10th Mountain's 1st Brigade combat team and participate in the counterterrorism mission against Al-Qaeda. Any take on that?
Well, I was in Afghanistan in 05, 06, and 07. It was part of the 10th Mountain Division, the same brigade that's going back now. And
Sergeant Dan McKnight, do we have you? Well, let's go to a break. We'll see if we can get him back online. We'll be back in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice. David Goloski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
Need a trusted hand sanitizer made in the USA? Physicians Group Hand Sanitizer reduces bacteria that can cause disease. Our liquid sanitizer is made of 75% ethanol alcohol. Our gel sanitizer is 70%. Neither requires soap or water. Simply cover all surfaces of your hands, then rub them together until dry. Our hand sanitizer comes in 2 to 16-ounce bottles and gallon jugs. Order now at easyhandsanitizer.com and receive 10% off all orders over $100. That's easyhandsanitizer.com.
Our monetary system is failing. Negative interest rates, growing debt, highly speculative market, and the dollar is being devalued by the Fed. Investing your wealth has never been more challenging. Who wants to earn just 1% interest annually in a savings account? There is another option, monetary metal. They pay interest on gold, in gold, with no storage costs ever. Visit interestongold.com/David. That's interestongold.com/David.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. We're live across the Sunshine State, FM and AM, and worldwide on our podcast and video live stream. And we're doing our Veterans Radio series we do each week here with Sergeant Dan McKnight of BringOurTroopsHome.us, as well as retired Major Danny Sjursen. And we've had a tale of contrast today of two individuals. We started off the show talking about Liz Cheney and her record of always wanting to get us into more conflicts without having skin in the game herself. And then we also have talked about General Smedley Butler, the general who patriotically wrote the book War as a Racket. So I wanted to let Sergeant Dan McKnight let us kind of give us some closing thoughts and reflections as we summarize this legacy. Do we have Sergeant Dan McKnight? Okay.
I don't know that Dan is back on, but this is, Danny Sjursen.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Dan is leading this BringOurTroopsHome.us, this awesome event on October 19th in Westchester, Pennsylvania, emphasizing the legacy of 19 years of war in Afghanistan, the anniversary of that, as well as the anniversary of, Smedley Butler's life, career, and birth date. And I think that there couldn't be a better figure today to bring together the otherwise disparate political factions that have the instinct, the sense, the sensibility that there's something obscene about a republic that stays at war for 19 years when it is not in the interest of national defense or any other major national security issues. So, the fact that Dan and myself are involved in this, as well as so many other veterans, I think is proof that, love of country can genuinely rise above anything partisan, and that the congressmen, even some of the veterans, the combat veterans who are in Congress, folks like Liz Cheney, folks like Jason Crow, who was a veteran, they are out of step with the American people on endless war, and they are out of step with America's veterans, 70% of whom are against maintaining our presence in Afghanistan forever. So, I think that Smedley Butler is a great figurehead. We're kind of conjuring his spirit and energy as motivation. And, I couldn't be prouder of been asked to take part in whatever small way. And I think that Dan and BringOurTroopsHome.us have just chosen an excellent venue and opportunity, and we're really excited about it.
Danny Sjursen, what do you think Smedley Butler would say if he was on that debate stage with the candidates tomorrow night?
Well, I think he'd roast both of them equally, and that's something that's really lacking when you have a media space that's become so highly partisan and corporate controlled. I think Smedley Butler go up on that stage and he would not be polite, David. He would not be polite. He would call out Biden's war hawk record. He would call out the places potentially where Donald Trump maybe hasn't followed his rhetoric or where he's been blocked. I don't think he'd be easy on either candidate. I certainly don't think he'd give a pass to the Democrats who as Dan mentioned, have, kind of lockstep supported anything that's anti-Trump on foreign policy, including cutting off the funds necessary to end a war, which is just truly frustrating and I think obscene, frankly. And so if he was on that stage, he'd make sure we talked about foreign policy, and he'd make sure that we honored our veterans by creating less of them, unless we are really defending this nation. And he would certainly point out some of the corporate contributions from defense contractors that are, toxic and destroying and influencing foreign policy making, so that the people's house is no longer in step with the people or doing the people's bidding on what is done in our name overseas.
Well, Danny Sjursen, I think they should wear those NASCAR uniforms with all the countries and logos of all the companies that have donated to their super PACs, these candidates, Truth and advertising.
I love that idea. Absolutely. We'd have the Raytheon and the Lockheed and the Honeywell and the Boeing patches. And frankly, on both sides of the aisle in Congress, we would find that everyone's NASCAR uniform, so to speak, would look remarkably similar, whether the background color was red or blue. It wouldn't really matter.
They say, wait a second, I can't distinguish the cars here. These drivers look identical. I can't tell who's winning. They're the same exact uniform. Very good. Well, tell us about your book and where people can find it, Danny.
Yeah, so my book, Patriotic Dissent, America in the Age of Endless War, is with Heyday Books. You can find it and order it. It's out now at the Heyday site. It's also on Amazon and just about every other outlet. I talk about Smedley Butler in the book, and essentially, like War is a Racket, this is kind of an extended essay on the nature of patriotism and what it means to dissent against forever war. It's just my little effort, and I'm glad that I got to talk about it.
Well, very good. It's always great to have you on, Danny Sjursen and Dan McKnight. Another great episode of Veterans Radio. I really appreciate this series that we've been able to develop and kick off now in our second edition. And we're going to have a lot of great conversations with veterans like Danny Sjursen. Check out his book, Patriotic Dissent. And also, if you want a little quick pamphlet that's very, very important and very, very timely, check out War is a Racket by Smedley Butler, General Smedley Butler. We need more generals like him, real patriots, to stand up and fight for the truth. We need to bring our troops home, bring them home. We just marched in, as Ron Paul said, and we can just march back home. I'm David Gronowski, bringourtroopshome.us. Godspeed.